Hi everyone, good afternoon, good morning, and thank you Virginia and Camila for hosting, and everyone for interested in learning about who we are, what we do at Haberco. So my name is Kuru Page and Lynn Peters here. I've been here for 20 years, gonna be 20 years in November. I started at Haberco at a very young age, holding many different positions from an advocate to coordinator, community program person, and a co-executive director. So Haberco is a local nonprofit organizations that really focusing on social justice, community investment, really looking at the root causes of domestic violence. And we're really focusing on a continuum of housing is one of our main kind of highlights for our work, from emergency housing to stabilized permanent housing. Because of our geographic area, we serve many immigrant populations. Especially they are from Central America, so one of our main focus is immigration as well. And we are a fan of collaborating with the communities. We can't do this work without our community. And we're a mainstream organization. We try our best not to colonize the community that we're working with, because that's what happened, right? When we have a mainstream organization, we tend to colonize other group of people. And we are still being aware of that. And I also want to tell you personally, I am identified as an Asian woman of color. So this leadership is between an Asian and white woman. So I can speak for a Latina woman or Black or Native or others. So I just, and then, Asian also, are viewed as a model minority, as you all know, as women of color. And so that's a different dynamic as well. So, and then I'm just gonna let Lynn introduce herself a little bit before I start.
Good.
Yes, thank you.
I'm Lynn Peters, and all of what Kuru said. And she's actually been here longer than I have. I've been here 17 years. It's been a while. We've been in these roles as co-executive directors for 10 years when the organization's founder left. I just wanted to mention, Kuru mentioned our housing work. Our program was the first in the state and possibly the country to actually develop and build permanent housing units specifically for survivors of domestic violence. And we are recognized by the Department of Justice to support survivors of abuse work towards citizenship through U visas, T visas, and VAWA petitions. And we're the only one, the only domestic violence program in the state of Massachusetts that does that. That's recognized with certified staff. The last thing I just wanted to mention was, as Kuru said, we recognize that we're a mainstream organization, but just to give a little bit of a picture to that, we work specifically in communities that are by far and large largely immigrant and largely Central American immigrants in our 5 different communities. Our staff is about 30 with about 15 full-time staff, and we are predominantly staffed by women of color across the organization. So on the full-time staff, it's only myself and one other white woman, and the rest of the staff are women of color. took us a while to get there, and we're proud to be there. And it's a very different feeling organization than most mainstream agencies. And last thing I wanted to mention is about half of our staff come from countries of origin other than the United States, and our entire staff, full and part-time, represent about 13 countries and speak about 13 different languages. Sorry, Karu. Should I go to the next one? Or do you want to add? Okay.
We also just want to make sure that we also adhere to the mission of the Women of Color Network as well. Is, you know, as you see on the screen, is to eliminate violence against all women and their community by centralizing the voices, leadership, and wellness of women of color across sovereign nations and the United States and the U.S. territories. So HABOCO's work also aligned with the WOCN as well, and we're really focusing on anti-oppression and racism. Everything that we're doing on a day-to-day basis, we integrate that. You know, we question our staff all the time. We don't just make decisions because people tell us to make decisions, but we're looking at the impact, like the intent and impact on the community and the survivors that we're working with. Do you want to?
Yeah, okay, so the next one. So, like Karu said, we incorporate anti-racism and anti-oppression into our shared leadership model as well as across the organization. And Virginia, you noted the NC TAP project. And so Karu and I each have been involved with this project since 2011, so about 7 years now. Between the two of us, I think we visited probably 6 or 7 of the coalitions that have been involved in the project. So it's very meaningful to us. We share that across the organization as well, and we really try to hold ourselves accountable to this work.
So yes, let's get into a real deal. So how we get there. So like Lynn said, 10 years ago, we were talking about co-directors, what it means, and you know, like what is leadership models. And I also want to say that based on a mainstream leadership model, which means that you hold certain position, right? Which means you're holding certain power and certain money. That's called leadership. But in our community, leadership look totally different, right? And someone can just do the hotline and that's their leadership. They know everything. So this model, all those, is still mainstream because we are co-executive directors, and which means that we hold certain powers and decision makings. We also, you know, compensate differently from everyone as well. So yeah, money's in power. And for a person of color, when this model was introduced, I was just like, what? Sharing leadership with a white woman, what does it mean? And what does it mean for the community? What does it mean for the board, for the organization, for the staff, for the survivors? It's a foreign language for everyone. How can you share powers? How can you share leaderships in kind of this, you know, mainstream operations, as you all know? And Lynn already said that most of the staff are people of color, and they're 3 white women, right? You, Michaela, and the other person, overnight staff. And also the mission of the organization from the get-go kind of helped us as well, because when HABOCO founded 20 years ago, the goal is to really support the leadership of women of color, promoting from within. So that's kind of makes sense, but there are lots of questions for both Lynn and I how we got ourselves into this. We've been working together for a while in collaboration with the former executive director. We kind of know each other, yet we don't know each other that much, right? It's like, yeah, we know, but there are lots of differences that we have to really tease it out, learning from one another as well, to have this genuine kind of leadership, and how we prepare ourselves to share the information with the community, because they're going to ask a lot of questions. Who they're going to go to for certain things, and then who's they're going to ask hold power for certain kind of decision making, right, when it comes to money, grant writings, and all of that. So we put ourselves into a lot of kind of learning at the same time, and it was scary for me as a person of color. Just to be honest, it was scary, and yet it's a great opportunity. And then when we look at the mission, we kind of feel like, wow, that makes sense. And neither one of us want to assume the single position as a sole executive director. So it makes sense. It makes sense that, you know, we can promote and support women of color in leadership by doing the, and it's a good model for the state as well. I think when we were starting, we are the only co-executive director for the DV and sexual assault programs in the state. And it's still foreign to people. And now I think we have probably 3 organizations that's doing co-ED, co-leadership, which is great, right? After 10 years. And then their co-ED looks different as well. So, and the board, we did a lot of work with the board as well. We had to hire the consultant to kind of work with the staff, with the board, and the community, and finally the board support. The leadership, they were questioning both of us as well. They felt like, it's so funny, they said, wow, it takes 2 people to handle one person's job, because the former executive director was very well respected and well known in the community. And but it makes sense for our organization, and it was supported by staff and the board and the community.
I know Karu's reminding me of the guy that was the president of the board at the time that we were transitioning from the founder to this co-director model, wanted to know who the general was, you know, like who is the ultimate one that held the responsibility. So, you know, it took us a while to help them get their heads around that you could speak with either one of us. Yeah, you know, that it would actually be easier and more accessible to the organization's leadership by having 2 people that actually spoke to each other. So, so that was funny. Who's the general? And Karu is right. When the founder was exiting, it was really her idea. And I remember the conversation. Karu and I were walking down. We took a walk around the block. Get some coffee and tea, and we were both like, you do it. I'm not going to do it, you do it. And we really had to do a lot of upfront work. And we're still learning about differences with each other. And I think our work gets stronger together as we go. And so how does it work? I mean, I think intentionality was the main point for us, is that we intentionally really communicate. And so when I came into the organization, I came as the grant writer, and as buildings started to be developed, I became the housing development manager. And so, my skill set within the organization was very different from Caru's. And, Caru did work that I didn't really understand all of the ins and out of that. So, why am I muted? I'm not, am I muted? Okay.
We can hear you.
Okay. I was just getting like little flashes on the screen. Excuse me. Intentionality, where was I? Oh yeah. So one of the things that we were very clear with each other about was that because we were aware that I'm a white woman and Caru is a person of color, and we had different roles within the agency, and besides me being white, my roles within the organization were also had a power imbalance to them as well, which is really interesting because we're only here to work with survivors, and yet that's not where the typically where the mainstream power structures are. So we had to work extra hard around making sure that both of us really understood the other's functions so thoroughly that we would be like one person. And so that any question that came from staff or from the community or from the board or whoever, that both of us would really have the same answer. And that wasn't really that hard because we kept coming back to the mission and to the common goal. So whenever there was a question or a disagreement, and still to this day, it's like, what are we going to do with this, whatever, $500? And maybe I want to do this and Caru wants to do that. We always come back to, wait a minute, what's our mission? And the answer always appears. So we don't have to get into too much ego. We're people. So both of us completely and totally share decision-making and responsibility across the board. Strategies, day-to-day, finances, administrative stuff, operations, fundraising, board, community, and again, underlining, prioritizing anti-oppression and anti-racism work.
Mm-hmm. Does anyone have questions so far? I mean, you can ask question if you want to. Okay, and I'm gonna go ahead. So what does it mean for me as a person of color doing the shared leadership with a white woman? So everywhere I go, and it's foreign to everyone as well, they ask, so explain to me, how does it work? What you doing? You have separate role. So they ask lots of questions, and I have to always, explain our relationship, which means it's new to them, and but it can be exhausting. People, if you say I'm an executive director, people already know you make decisions for everything, right? If you're co-executive director, what does it work? What decision you're making? So yeah, you have to always explain. And as a person of color, I think I can relate to other person of color as well. It's like you have to always prove yourself and model yourself all the time, everywhere you go. It's like a white woman can make 10 mistakes. It will be laughed at, it will be okay. But if a woman of color just make a mistake, that will be held accountable. So it's like you are, even though you want to be who you are, but you also have to have this awareness all the time, how the community respond to you as a person of color, how the staff and the board respond to you. The other piece as well there, I got into this kind of leadership without knowing internally with staff, because I said, yeah, you know, we have all staff of color. Cool, I'm gonna get all the support from the staff of color. They're more, but I was totally wrong. The staff of color are more critical than the people from the community. And then there are lots of kind of like, you know, staff play both of us as well. Because, you know, I mean, it's part of how you side with people to gain power, right? And you see that playing a lot of the time. And Lynn and I have to always talk about, okay, I already make this decision and they going your way. So we always kind of inform each other with decision that we're making together or separately, and who we talk to, so that we don't get played in this relationship. And sometimes I feel tokenized. And I remember I was the also, I think at the time, I think toward the end, I was the chair, board chair of the coalition. And oftentimes I felt like I was so tokenized, you know, either by white women, by women of color. Because, you know, and women of color also have lots of questions, because they want to know if this real, you know, is this relationship is real. Do you really have the power in decision making, in co-running the organization? And as much as they're critical about it, they also want to know that this is a real stuff. And they also very supportive as well. And then sometimes, because it can be exhausting, sometimes I ask myself, how did I get myself into this, right? Even though it's really good, it's a great opportunity for both of us and for the organization and the community. But you can't afford not to ask yourself when you get questions by many, many people.
So what's it mean for the white person to share power? I too spend a lot of my time explaining the relationship as if it makes one or the other of us weaker. As Karu mentioned earlier, one of the board's comments was, in general, was, oh, so it takes two of you to do this other person's job. And without understanding the layers that went into configuring the co-directorship model. There's also, I spend a lot of time, it's constant. I think one of the things that was the hardest and still is the hardest is, so you're a person, and you want to believe that you have genuine relationships with people, and you're in a position of power, and you want to do a good job, and you want to have good relationships with your coworkers, and you want to be fair, and you want to be loved, and all of that, and so when you start a conversation with, I really want to know how you feel, and then you find out later that what they said was not really how they felt. That was really hard. And what that is a reflection of is that no matter what I do, I cannot put down my privilege, and I cannot put down my power. And so my relationships with my coworkers are, they're going to be a little bit different. And it's in a way, it's sad, but it's something that I have to come to grips with. And I guess it's probably true for everybody, but that's the hardest part for me, is that I have to be aware of that. And taking responsibility for privilege and power, I think Karu touched on when she makes a decision, she has to make sure that people know that it's a real decision. And it's painful because I can be really flip sometimes. I know that's kind of hard to believe, but I can be flip. And sometimes I'll be flip about something and not really mean it. And people will take that as something that was signed off on, that the decision was made. And for Karu, sometimes we have to actually use the words, this is a decision. Karu has to actually say the words, I'm making this decision, which is also pretty painful. So it's something that is constantly there, is always there. And again, I think those are the hardest parts. That even when I'm not in the lead, I'm still viewed as the decision maker and the power holder. And that has impact. So, I know it's usually like, wah, 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 I have this privilege, wah, wah, wah. But there is impact on that. And it's hard on everybody. So on a daily basis, I have to reflect, and I screw up. Sometimes, the crew's smiling at me. Sometimes on a daily basis, sometimes not so much, and I have to take responsibility for when that does happen, and I have to remind myself on a daily basis that this is the work I'm going into. This is what I'm carrying into the work with me, and this is really what I need to be aware of so that I can do something different. So, why are you laughing at me?
No, I'm just, it's real.
It's heartfelt.
Yeah, and I also want to add to what Lynn said, and because we are so operate in this mainstream, and even I'm an Asian woman, a person of color, and sometimes I have to also kind of check my privilege as well as an Asian woman, and then also, being in this construct, you also part of this oppression and racism. It's like the decision you're making sometimes, you're part of that oppression as well. So for me, I have to always check my privilege, the powers, the money that I make from this organization, and the staff that work under us or with us. And because I'm seeing myself as part of the construct of the racism and oppression system.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, Karu. And also just want to mention that there's not a day, I can say this with absolute accuracy, that there's not a day that goes by that there's not a conversation at our organization about racism or oppression. And that doesn't always generate from us. That's across the staff. So the staff really holds that as well, and everybody is paying attention. So it's at the forefront daily.
So what it means for us working together, one of the things early on, we did a lot of work is to really understand our strengths and our skills, and use it as a benefit, not as a weakness. And I just want to share, sometimes we bump head, we have our differences in our decision making. And when that happened, we just said, hey, this is your field of expertise. So I'll trust you will make that decision. I'm just going to pull myself out. I'm going to trust you in that decision making, and value that skill set that you have, that insights that you have, and then that will align with our mission, our principle, our core values. So we do a lot of that as well when we can't seem to kind of align sometimes. So we do that.
Yeah, and that is key, because we can never forget that we're models of two people sharing power, and that we're in these co-director positions, and that folks are watching us. And so we model that every opportunity that we have. So even if we can't come to a decision together, we're transparent about that. We'll actually say, we're not really together on this, and here are the reasons why. And so together we've decided to go at it this way, or we're just not going to make a decision on this. We're going to let you all decide what to do, and whatever makes the most sense will work. So, and I think we're pretty practiced at that.
Right, and
pretty good at that.
Yeah, and we share a lot of the information with everyone through finance, through grants, through community information. So the staff is aware of everything's going on. And we always solicit information from the staff as well before we make any decision. So it's even though we are operating in this hierarchy, and then sometimes our decision making is more collective as well. Make sure everybody understand we are on the same page. Is it the right thing that we are doing with the client, with the community, with the grant, with the money that we going after? Sometimes we said, no, we don't want your money because your money stink. No, just kidding. Your money doesn't support our missions. And it's a funder driven, and it's not client and community driven. And we have done that several times. And but at the same time, we also really committed to solve all of the issues that we're having, either within us or within the organization.
I think strategy is also important around honoring our differences. And so, there's people in the community that are much more comfortable with Karu than they are with me. And then there's other people in the community that are much more comfortable with me than they are with Karu, for whatever reason, for history or background. And so we don't spend a lot of time with, why do they like you better? We don't really go there. We use that as a tool and a strategy, so that if we need something as an organization, or we're looking to deepen partnerships, we know which person to send in. And sometimes it's not even us. Sometimes it's somebody else on the team that might make the most sense, and then we can support that to happen. So I think that's a key piece. We have at Harbor Cove, we have some what do you call them? Core values, and one of them is to reduce barriers, and we take that into all of our work, not just with survivors that we're working with, but across the team and with partners and in the community, and trying to make decisions. We're always about reducing barriers and not making things more complicated and crazy making.
And we always embrace skill building among us, among community, clients, and everyone that we work with. Any questions so far?
There are no questions, just great comments. Sumaya, do you want to add anything? Do you want to read what's going on in the chat?
It looks like I'm the one who's got the most going on in the chat room.
which is great. No, it's great, because it's wonderful that you're able to like wrap it all up and put it in words. I value that.
Yeah, I am just so appreciative. Since we're taking a moment for comments, I'm very appreciative of your presentation and the sharing of your experiences, what you've learned and how you actually model this work. And I think it's very valuable information for the movement to have, so that we can continue to change the landscape of the movement, from women of color feeling pushed out, and white women in the movement being fearful of, repercussions of strengthened women of color leadership, and that they would be pushed out. But this is a very good demonstration of how we can walk alongside and have equitable leadership and share leadership. So I just want to say that this is good. This is really good. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Samaya.
Thank you, Samaya.
This one's challenges, right? So, what are the challenges? There are many, lots of challenges, good challenges. From my perspective, with everything that we've been taught that it's easier just to do it yourself. Just do it yourself. And that comes up. I'm sure it comes up for Carew too, because it's like we do go through, well, have you checked? Have you asked? Have you talked with? How do you know that this is the right thing to do? And so working in a real team, in an authentic team environment, and appreciating the strengths that everybody brings. Carew mentioned the hotline, and there's all kinds of leadership in an organization. I think we stopped defining it a long time ago. I mean, we were also victims of mainstream definitions of leadership. That a person would be in leadership if they were supervising other people. How crazy, like that's, it's like, who are the overseers? Let's pay them more. That whole line of thinking. And so, and what are the skills that are more valuable? But we've had the opportunity to have people step up and identify what they want as leadership. And while we may not, personally, that, cooking for, wanting to take on the responsibility to cook for every community event, because that's that person's lifeblood, that's a leadership quality. And personally, maybe it's like, first of all, I don't cook. So, personally, I may not have the same appreciation for it for myself, but in another person, they come alive. That's their lifeblood. So, negotiating those differences in perspectives and not judging, and not, remembering sort of where you come from and how that plays out. And that's a challenge, to stay present and to stay grounded every moment of the day. And not always possible.
Mm-hmm. And I also want to acknowledge, even though Habakkuk tried to address anti-oppression and racism, we are still also operate in a mainstream structure, like Ben said. We are not kind of collective equally that everybody get the same pay check, the same amount, the same level. There's still differences, like even the titles, right? Coordinators, directors, supervisors, and all of that. So I want to also acknowledge that. And we have a lot of work to do. And for us, I think it takes time. We do a lot of processing. Sometimes you just like, can we just make decisions? But we just want to make sure that we process it and we take time to do it right. We don't want to be reacting to the thing that coming at us and making decision that later on might impact the staff, the community, the client especially, and their children. So processing is part of ours. And it's not just for women. People is like, yeah, women process a lot. That's not true. We just want to make sure that it's the right thing to do. And then, you know, I'm coming from a very community-oriented, family-oriented, like, you know, the success of you is the success of the family. The success of the family is the success of you. It's not just you individual as a person who will succeed. So it's like a whole different kind of structure for me. And then learning from Lynn, that's, you know, sometimes, you know, each culture, each differences have pros and cons. And so I learned a great deal as well in this relationship, kind of take the best out of it for the organization, for myself as well. And for the staff too, even those we integrate anti-oppression, racism, decision-making process into the organization. Everyone has their own different level of understanding of oppression and racism. That's including women of color too. The new staff who just hired never get the opportunity to talk about racism in their previous job. So that's new for them, and there's learning. And that doesn't mean that they have never been experiencing racism and oppression. They have. It's just something new that they're learning, and it takes time for them to build that trust within the organization and within their peers, with us, to really speak up and share their experiences and their thought process with the organization. So we constantly kind of every week we have a staff circle for 2 hours, so we tackle all of those stuff that's been going on.
So we have some questions. Is that okay to us?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So someone, I believe it's Denise, is asking her comment says, the other amazing impact of the leadership model is that it shows a new path to cooperative relationships for survivors and children that are receiving services from your organization. And the question is, are there any challenges with funders who may want the buck to stop, in quotes, with just one single person of contact, one single point of contact?
I don't think we've actually, when we came into the position, Harbor Cove was already established. So Harbor Cove had a reputation, I think. And so we had a couple of long-standing funders, you know, our major funders. They were welcoming.
Mm-hmm. We was intentionally, in fact, Lynn and I scheduled when we become co-executive director, we scheduled meeting with all of the funders, all the community leaders, introducing ourselves. And I mean, there are a few that they still watching us because they had great relationship with the former executive director. And yeah, they want to know if we a real deal or not, and we can do the work, and we can genuinely kind of running the organization. We have a few of those, and yet at the same time, because of the work that we're doing, and especially the structure that we build at Harbor Cove, that's already responding to the community and the survivor that we're working with, and the funder, regardless who's here, there's already a mission and structure. Okay. So they know that. that we're not going to change because that's the structure. Oh, we might change a little bit, maybe, but it's already built in, which work for our benefit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then just to touch on something that Denise had mentioned with survivors and their children. So I think one of the made me think, and then I think I saw Mercedes is in the group too. We had a conversation about this recently. So we are, one of our major funders had initially come from the Department of Children and Families, which is now the Department of Public Health is our main funder. And so we're required, everybody here is required to be a mandated reporter. And so, in this work, that's tough stuff. But we never, if we're in a position where we believe that we really need to file, we don't do that without the family. So we even connect with the family and say, this is what we're looking at. This is what we feel like we need to do. How are we going to do this together? We would never, surprise somebody or act as an agent. It would be even that work is done in cooperation. And because of the relationship with the funder, we can have those conversations as well. And a few times we've had the funder say, you know what, let's do this instead. And it's benefited the family in the long run and benefited us, right? Because it's all trauma. It's all, vicarious trauma, and it's tough stuff. It's troubling work.
And we want to make sure it's a community-driven funding. It's not the funder-driven funding. So we are in a consistent kind of sharing information with the funders all the time, and communication, building relationship constantly.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We have a question. So we have Joyce Nelson. She wants to ask you a question right now.
Yes, hi. On the mandated reporters, I just recently went through that course myself, and I was under the understanding that you do not approach the family before you report anything. And a minute ago, I think I heard you say that you approach the family before you go to the courts.
Before we go,
understanding.
Yeah, we definitely go to the family first. We would never not. And we're in Massachusetts. I'm not sure what state you're in.
California.
Where are you?
California.
California. Yeah, I heard about you in California. Yeah. I think that's a really bad idea. And, it's recorded, so I won't say what I was going to say. But you can't do this work without working with the family and letting the family know. Your credibility just goes right out the window. We're working with the family on domestic violence and sexual assault and child abuse and all of that stuff, and then to turn around and report you, and then, to be creepy about it and maybe file it anonymously there's no integrity there.
Yeah, and
right.
Our goal and our responsibility, the reason why we have this organization, we are accountable to our clients, to the survivors that we're working with. Yes, we get the funding, we're accountable to them, but yet our main purpose is to be accountable to the clients. We never ever do anything without the family knowing. So that's part of building trust, building community, and we do it in a ways that we love the client. We just want to make sure that that the harm might not be done to the children or to them. Even though we're reporting, we're still supporting the client, make sure that we get all of the information, creating access, continuing the support for the clients, because it's so important.
Yeah, and that's not to say too, obviously every case is different, and you've got to assess what the safety situation is. You've got to understand the perpetrator. You've got to understand all of that stuff before you go and have a conversation.
Right.
So that's, you can't just make a blanket and be like, yeah, we pick up the phone and call them right away. We definitely have to walk through a process before we do that as well.
Right, right. Yeah, I took that as well as the professional supervised visitation provider. And I also have the domestic violence advocate certificate. So I was going to try to work it all together as a service to the community. So I'm sure there will be lines that I have to draw, but it's very interesting to hear you guys. Yes.
Right.
I mean, even if it's a perpetrator that we're reporting on, we would have the conversation with the person that we're working with. You know what I mean? So.
Right.
Well, thank you so much for that question and for the answer. Joyce, if you're following the chat, there are some comments from other people in California who may be a good resource to you to connect with, because as is mentioned a few minutes ago, every case is different, and every and involving the family is a must principle. How you involve the family, it's another way. It varies by agency or region, and things that people, responsibilities. But definitely there is a conversation going on in the chat that is related to the obligations of mandated reporters and in California. So this opened something that is very interesting. And I don't want to miss a question, if you all don't mind. I want to go back to Norma's question, because it's almost like we want to recap what you have mentioned throughout the webinar. Norma is asking, are there any ways in that you allow the other to take the lead in areas where one person has strengths and help balance the areas where one is less strong? And how do you navigate that with the communities, to both your board and your staff? Does that make sense?
Segue to that.
I know. No, go ahead. Can you nutshell the question? Just the tail end of the question again, Virginia?
Can you repeat the question, Virginia?
Yes. Are there ways in that you allow the other to take the lead on areas where the second person, I think, has, or when one person has the strength to help and balance the areas where the other one is less strong? And how do you navigate that and communicate with both the board and the staff? So share leadership, how do you do it?
So that's a big question with different parts to it. So I think we're both pretty good at knowing where we're weak, because we ask each other for help all the time. Can you look at this for me? I don't know how to go into this. Can you help me with this? I'm not sure what I'm looking at. Lately, mine with our major fundraiser coming up is Carew. I can't remember what happened yesterday. Can you tell me? We're pretty good at that, and I think we're pretty good at recognizing each other's strengths as well.
And sometimes, I mean, in this relationship also, and in part of our training, we do the thing the opposite way as well. It's like, I might not want to spend time to talk about reporting, but I'm gonna go into the website looking at, because Lynn, she has expertise in data reporting, and sometimes I have to look at it. I have to look at the client's list. I have to review it. I have to make sure that I understand the whole system, because if she's not around, then I should be able to go into it. And sometimes we can talk about the board too, because the board always expected that, the person who has strength in finance is Lynn, right? They always ask Lynn, and Lynn has to step back and say, hey, Karu, you know, why don't you talk about finance with the board? Because it's not that I don't know, I know, but because of the expectation from the mainstream that, okay, you know, white woman must have all of the financial knowledge. So Lynn have to practice letting me do that all the time. And then when the board asks her, she's like, oh, go ask Lynn. Ask Karu, because she knows, you know. So Lynn has to model that all the time to kind of change their thinking, their thought process. And I might do the same thing with the collaboration partner because I'm always out there all the time.
Hopefully that answered it. And we talked a little bit earlier about strategizing stuff. And like Karu says, sometimes we mix it up. If we know that, you know, we have a particular situation with a partner that, you know, sees Karu or I in a certain way, the other one will go, just to mix it up, just to, you know, keep running down the point that we're a unit, you know, because we can, you know, Karu said we get played by staff sometimes. Sometimes we get played by partners, and so we try to. We're pretty cagey, so we, you know, that's a lens we're always looking through as well. Any others, Virginia?
No questions, just comments and a comment. Mandated reporting specifically to California, so there are different ways that that gets done, and so if you want to continue with the presentation, we may have time. Yeah. We will have time later on for more questions.
Yeah. And one last note on California. It's from what I understand, it's a new thing, and so it's going to feel crazy. Whatever the thing that came down most recently feels new. This slide is not supposed to also say challenges. It's supposed to say benefits or strengths or Yahoo or affirmations. These are so ignore the word challenges.
You know, the benefit of this of this co-directorship is that we're always honoring our relationship over the years that we have been working together, and be continuing building the relationship and trust with one another. So it's beneficial, and it's creating more access, in fact, for this sharing power and sharing leadership, for especially for our community, for survivors, because both of us bring different strengths to decision making, to the responses to the community. Otherwise, we'll make decision a lot of the time that we are going to colonize the community and the survivor that we serve.
So, like we said earlier, we just stick to the mission. We just come back to that, and as long as that's the way that we're moving through, and through the lens, particularly of anti-racism and anti-oppression, that just kind of lights the way for us. And so it really doesn't matter most of the time who's doing what. So.
And we also benefiting the community and the staff. They always have access to one of us for any support. We never schedule a vacation at the same time. And you know, Lynn's aware that I have kids, and my vacation is during kids' vacation, so she's not taking that, and she'll take some other time that the school in session. So we always have that access for the client, the staff, the community, the board.
Yeah, and I think it also increases their access to what's a word? around their own decision making. And I was going to say initiative, but I don't like that word initiative. I can't think of another word at the moment. But self-determination, I guess, around how they move through the agency and how they do their work. I think the way that the leadership of the organization is modeled, that makes it more accessible for them as well. They're in control of their schedule, and I mean there still has to be communication because we want to make sure that we have emergency stuff covered. But for the most part, they're in control. We're not, punching cards and monitoring, right? And all those things that the board made fun of the model for early on around it takes two to do this one person's job. This is a big job, and it's bigger than one person. And those who were on the webinar, who are sitting in executive director's chair, know that this is a big job. So they want you to do fundraising and administrative and operations and HR and like the whole shebang. And so we got each other, and that's a dream to be able to have. I mean, most executive directors do not have a real counterpart, a real peer counterpart. If they're leaning on their board, that person's in a position of power. And if they're, leaning on a deputy or whatever people call them, that's also a power dynamic.
And I mean, for both of us, for me and for both of us as well, it's good to have kind of check and balance as well. Because, sometimes I might react to certain thing and I was just like, this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna send this email, I'm gonna call this person, and then I have a partner who said, wait a minute, I think you're reacting. Can you sit on that for a little while? Talk it through, or sometime I just say, listen to me, I'm just one thing right now. It's great to have that kind of trust and peer support versus like I have to think, who should I call and complain about this? Versus have a person that I can just, hey, when I'm off balance, when I'm reacting, I have the space that I can just, release it, and then someone will help support me with that.
I often react. I know that that's hard to believe too, but I often react and, get like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And Karu's words they always go through my head. But Lynn, what would happen if that happened? And that slows my roll. And so I've learned now that even if Karu isn't here, I can practice that with myself. So that's a gift. I appreciate that, by the way. Thank you.
I sit on stuff too before I just send an email. This is what I'm gonna say to this person, and I'll fix it later. So appreciate that.
All right. So meanwhile, the reason for our existence, right, is to work with survivors in the community and their children. And so how does the model benefit survivors? How does, we think so.
Especially the community that we are working with, it's great to have that balance, that we're not solely operate from a mainstream perspective when we develop program, when we work with the staff and hiring, especially who we are hiring, who we promoting. So it support that mission of program development. And the one thing also, Habuco is very team oriented. Everyone is part of the hiring practice. Everyone is part of the program development. We will not develop anything without getting information from survivors, from community, from staff, from everyone. I spoke earlier about a long process. Sometimes it can be exhausted. But it works. It works. We don't want to be reacting to everything. We want to be proactive. We want to make sure that we take time to do the right thing, because eventually that will support survivors, especially survivor of color.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just thinking of a recent one of the. There are a couple of questions through our intake process with survivors, and somebody questioned it and said, "Yeah, but this may not be true for this particular community. This doesn't really get at it," and so we were able to change things around and deepen the understanding of why that didn't make sense for a particular community. And overall, again, I mean, we don't have a lot of, I mean, we have some challenges, but we don't have any, I don't think we have, of course we don't have any reasons for why you shouldn't do this. If you can, you know, and we're small, we're a small organization. We've got about a $2 million a year budget and work with 5 different local communities plus statewide, and then national, of course, through hotline and emergency housing and stuff. And we can, you know, we've been able to figure this out. So everything is, I think everything is positive for us. Even the days that Karu is mad at me, we're able to work that out.
And I think basically is, you know, the main goal is to creating access for survivor and remove all the barriers through individual working with clients, through policy change, to funder, like everything that we do is creating access and removing barriers.
And you know, and I think in our situation, there's a natural check and balance built into the way we work to check ourselves for dominant values in the workplace, for white supremacy in the workplace, for undoing it, for recognizing it so that we can do something different. And just a couple more examples. You know, for me, every day I learn something new, and I should say deeper, not necessarily new, but the complexities of white privilege and power that has only made my work better. Not only my work at the organization, but in my relationship with Karu, in my relationship across the organization, in my relationships outside of the organization. So I'm deeply grateful to be able to have the opportunity to be doing this and to be doing it with Karu.
And you know, in our community, now that we are here for 10 years, they know all of us basically, and they have lots of respect for our organization. And I'm proud to say that all of the things that we are doing on a daily basis, that never one that we don't address the racism and oppression. Even when we go into the community, because especially the community that we work with, most of them are people of color, like 60% of our clients and the community makeup are immigrants and people of color. So when we do training, domestic violence training or any other training, we address anti-oppression and racism because we understand how oppression impacts survivor domestic violence when they accessing resources outside of Harbor Code. So we are in a constant kind of, you know, constant learning from the community, and then also teaching the community how oppression impact as a survivor as well. So which is great, and we've been doing that. If we don't have this model, I would imagine if we are mainstream and we probably colonizing, we're gonna go to the community and say, hey, this is what you should do, instead of how can we partner with you? What can we do? How can we do it with you? Any other questions?
And then I'm just going to pop our contact up there as well. So if anybody wants to reach out through email, feel free to do that. And then in a couple of seconds, we'll stop sharing so that we can see the chat box, because it sounds rich.
Mm-hmm.
You can do it now. You can stop sharing in a few minutes after people get your information. But I wanted to ask you, I wanted to ask you if it's okay to share this information with participants.
Yes.
Yes? Okay. Is my audio not coming out right?
No, you're good.
We can hear you.
All right. And I have a question that I wrote down here. Would it be hard to replace you? Life goes on. You're ready to transition into some other national role, or something happens. Would it be hard to replace you? And how would that happen? Would it be like one job description, trying to do everything you all do, or we're gonna find a person of color and a white person to co-lead? It's just been pondering on me, and so that's a question. And also, is this model something that, let's say in my community there's an executive director position open, can I potentially find a partner, a co-director, and apply together? Is that something that is you would recommend and sell the combination of two to this one position? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. So I would say, I'm not sure if you hire two co-executive director from the outside and put them together. I don't know how that will work. We are fortunate that we are promoted from within. We know each other for a while, and so it works for our benefits. And I'm not sure if both of us leave and there's two new coming in, how it would work. All those, like I said earlier, Habaco has a very strong team, has good foundation, has good mission statement, has good structure. The organization can be run without either one of us or both of us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess my hope would be, I think Karu and I are always thinking about grooming. There's another terrible word. But because of the way, not grooming like grooming. We're always thinking about that and wanting to share that leadership and power across the organization, however that looks. So I guess my hope would be that, let's say that I don't hold this position, that it would be two women of color. And if Karu's not holding the position and I'm not holding the position, I'm hoping that it's two women of color within Harbor Cove that want to.
As part of our succession plan.
As part of our succession plan, because you need to have one. And like Karu says, we've seen a couple disasters in our state with co-directors where they actually hired two people that didn't really know each other.
And they didn't have good structure too.
And they didn't have good infrastructure. So, but like Karu said, there's three that we can think of across the state now, and one of them.
No, it's back four.
Who's four?
So Haley.
Oh, okay. So yeah. So actually, there's a couple of them that primarily they're two women of color, right? There's one organization that's a white woman and a woman of color. that just started doing it in the last year or so. So we get like calls or emails. Can we meet with you and find out? Like Carew said, is this really real? You know, does Carew really have any power, or is she afraid of you? You know, that kind of stuff.
I'll say yes.
Thank you. That makes sense.
Any other questions for us? And feel free to contact either one of us as well if you want to learn more, or you want to chat more with my Boston accent. Feel free to do so.
So I put in the chat box a little bit about approaching this as a wellness model. You know, the rate of burnout
Right.
in this movement, because we're in such crisis-oriented environments, especially for, you know, people who are on the front lines, but also it's crisis-oriented when you are trying to meet deadlines, trying to be everywhere, trying to be everything to everyone as one person, you know? So maybe looking at this through a lens of wellness, shared responsibility, shared accountability, shared benefits, you know, shared community presence, you know, because a lot of times the executive director, the one person gets to be or becomes the face of the organization, right? And so that comes with a lot of responsibility as well, because when everything's good, it's good.
Right.
But when everything's not good, then, you know, you don't want to be the face of the organization, right? It's like, oops, I want to be something else, somebody else at that moment. But maybe looking at this in terms of an approach to wellness and modeling wellness in the community and for the organization is a way to look at that. And also too, that would mean, you know, boards would have to think on that, you know, and also to encouraging that model with funders, you know. So as we are really working to push the envelope movement wide with decolonizing some of the ways in which we have functioned in the past that have really created some really unhealthy environments and situations, I'm just asking that we think about this and that you all be on the forefront of leading that conversation, because you know, in your presentation, you model that well in your authenticity and your transparency and honesty. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, wellness is key, definitely key. And so, you know, either one of us can be sick and not worry about it. Neither one of us gives the person any pressure. You know, stuff comes up. Family stuff you know, things come up, and we model that across the agency as well. Like, you know, we'll send people home. Sometimes it'll be like, nah, you're too sick to be here. Please go, you know, because people don't want to let go sometimes. And I think, you know, wellness in a traditional model too, it's important to us that when it comes time to renew the health insurance every year, we have to renew that every year. Carew and I don't make that decision either. We go to the staff And because we know that everybody has different needs. We've got folks that are in their 20s and folks that are in their 60s. And so try to figure out what's going to work best for, you know, for people, because health insurance is key. You know, holidays, and pick your own holidays, whatever works for you.
We are very, very flexible, and we also promoting wellness and also healing, not just with survivor, but we're also with staff as well, with our team. Because we know that secondary vicarious trauma also impacts the individual and the team. So it is important to have that healing support. We do a lot of group process, and also with survivor we bring yoga,
Sound healing, whatever that is.
Yoga, sound healing, dance therapy, qigong, tai chi, you know, all of that minds and spirit kind of support into a workplace.
And then what you had mentioned too, Samaya, about being the face, we've started to figure that out too. It took us a couple years to get there. You know, we were like, Peru, you do this one, I'll do this, you do that. Now we spread it around. Every time there's you know, a community gathering that we need to be there and in support of, other people go. We share it. You know, buy the tickets or whatever the piece is, or whoever's going to do the speaking piece will work with other people. And that's work too. So people get to see the whole face of the organization and not just us. And I think we became sensitive to that because our founder was, you know, like her face was on the milk carton basically. And you know, that's all anybody knew. They didn't even know anybody else worked here.
Yeah, and I imagine that's good for staff morale as well, to feel valued and, you know, a valued part of the organization. I was also thinking about in terms of vacationing. So when one of you is on vacation and the other is, you know, still at the office, that you can vacation without thinking, oh my God, I'm going to get, you know, what if I get an emergency call for whatever, you know, so someone else is still behind at the organization that has authority and power, you know, to address the situation. Whereas if that wasn't the case, when the executive director is away, someone else within the organization is, you know, left with that, you know, with that situation and that kind of authority. And sometimes that can be pretty dynamic, even though it's a short period of time. So it just feels really solid to me that when one is away and the other is still there, you know, to hold down the fort and to, you know, keep things moving without much hiccup in, you know, in decision making and things like that. That just feels really good. Feels wholesome.
Yeah. You want to take that? Looking at a comment from Mercedes. What suggestions would you offer for mainstream organizations that just start working on creating awareness about power and privilege in their communities? I think probably identifying the agency first needs to identify itself as a learning organization, and to start creating that culture, and then popping in to really paying attention. There's so many places to start. I think when we have folks come in as new staff, that's part of the initial training is on racism and oppression. That's part of the interview process as well. What else?
I think have the whole team kind of be part involved. It's basically, I think, I always say, if you want to do effective racism and oppression work and addressing that within your community, you have to start within yourself, within your own organization first. And I'm talking from the top to the bottom, from the board to the staff, to individual, to the team, to part-time. And we still, like for Habakkuk, we're still learning. We still, like the full-time staff are really good in terms of how we address integrating anti-oppression and racism work within ourselves and our community. We still have a lot of work to do with the board and also volunteers and part-time because of the scheduling and how do we integrate all of that. So we still in the learning, like Lynn said, it's a learning organization, and intentionally do it intentionally, and genuinely, when you go to the community, you genuinely respect the community, respect the leadership, respect all the abundance that they have. Because most of the time we think that they lack of everything. We go as mainstream and change the whole infrastructure for the community. That's when it's not working. And I would say take time, do it right, build relationships slowly, make sure you understand all of the structure that they already have, and how can you be. You're not going to go there and be a family member. You're going to start being a guest, and how to learn to be a guest, a good guest, and before you become a family. Or or sometimes you're never going to become a family at all because they don't trust you. So just learning constantly.
Yeah, and I think practicing asking the question, say when decisions are made around really anything about, really, why are we doing this? What, what's the rationale around this? And
who's going to benefit?
Who's going to benefit, and what are the impacts? To be able to practice doing that. And, having said all of that, there's still going to be resistance. And you have to gingerly move through that resistance depending on where it's coming from. So ideally, it's going to start with someone who has some kind of lens and some kind of humility to get the ball rolling. Unfortunately. Or someone who's open enough to be pushed. Mercedes likes your comment. Want to be a guest. Thanks, Mercedes. We're all guests, right?
Thank you.
Wherever we are all guests.
This is incredibly thoughtful webinar. I've learned so much, and my mind is wondering, and I think mind of many others. So I personally want to thank you. And if there aren't any more questions or comments, I'll let, or you have any last remarks, I would also hand it over to Sumaya, and she can do the proper closing.
I just encourage everyone, especially mainstream, that this can happen. Especially white women, when you're ready to share power. And it's not that difficult.
Yeah. Thank you so much for this presentation. This has been really informative, and I really appreciate what you've shared with us today, and just appreciate the work that you do, and just appreciate both of you for who you are in the world. I am going to see if there would be a woman of color on the screen who would share last words. If you're able to open your screen, then that would let me know that you're open to doing last words. That would be great. And while they're making a decision about that, this is our last webinar. And I want to remind you that on October the 1st, we will have a community sharing opportunity from 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And you're invited to that. An email was sent to you, I think on Monday. You should have received that to give you the link to register for that, so that we'll know people are actually going to be with us. And there you will learn more about the overarching National Call to Action Technical Assistance Project, some of the things that we've accomplished, to hear about what we've learned, to hear about what are our next steps in terms of round 4. OVW awarded us another year for our work, and so we will be moving into planning our round 4 in October. We'll start our planning process then. And so you'll learn more about the work that we intend to do from here. So I hope you will be on that call. And also too, we will probably have, I'm pretty sure at that time, we will have much more information about the call to action in St. Pete on November the 14th to the 16th. So you'll hear more about that too. So it'll be a brief community sharing opportunity, and I hope that you will be there. So, anybody volunteering to give last words? Any woman of color to give last words? Okay, I was looking for someone from the screen here that's not already on the screen. So I'm going to ask for Henia, if you would give us last words, and your last words would end our time today, and then we will be saying bye-bye just for a little while until October the 1st. So could you give us last words, please?
Oh my, this is what happens when you share your screen.
All right.
I have no last words, Sumaya. Thank you for letting me know that my earrings were touching the earphones and making noise. Really caught me off guard. Thank you everyone for this. I guess my role here, I can truly say that it went beyond the program administrator. I don't get as involved typically in issues or things that are happening, because I have other things to take care of behind the scenes. But this one drew me. It totally did. And so I want to thank everyone for it. It really it's really something that I'll take to heart, and I will record send the recording later, the PowerPoint presentation. And so thank you for demonstrating everything, not only preaching and talking to other people, but demonstrating how it's another world is possible. And so have a great rest of the day, rest of the week. And Sumaya, go on your vacations and have the best time ever. We'll take care of your business. Don't worry about anything. So thank you for making me part of this work.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.